So good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dunn. I'm a supervisor in Redbud, and we'll have a town hall meeting. I want to have a conversation on some issues that I think are important. I'd like to hear what you have as your concerns. There are people here that might agree or disagree with me or with each other, but we're really looking for policy solutions to some issues. So let me just run through some facts on Frederick County. Some of you have lived here all your life, some of you are brand new. In 1980, there were 34,000 people here. In 1980, where the Martins is on Pleasant Valley, that was a white farmhouse. And for those of you who've lived here a lot longer than I have, you could probably do other things. Where we are right now in 1980 was woods. You could go deer hunting here. In 1990, it was 45,000. In the year 2000, it was 59,000. So in that 20-year time frame, this county grew about 15,000 people. In 2010, the number went up to 78,000. In 2020, it's 91,000. Today, it is 95,000. So we've grown approximately 30,000 people, 35,000 people in the last 20 years. In the preceding 20 years, it was 15. And that's the growth that we're dealing with. Walden Cooper is an organization that goes and says, this is what we expect the growth to be. And our expected growth over the course of the next 20 years is expected to be an additional 40,000 to 50,000 people. We are bringing in someplace in the neighborhood of 1,500 to 2,000 people a year, and that's huge. So that's the issue that we're dealing with. Frederick County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state, if not the fastest growing county in the state. From my perspective, the main issue here is how to address growth. If you can solve that problem, all other issues go away. But that, to me, is a key issue. Right now, we have about 13,000 homes or 13,000 lots that can be developed. So if you own one of those lots, you can build a house on it today. There are no proffers, there's no cost to you, there's no money to the county. And those proffers were done 20 years ago. For example, over at Bedford and Cincinnati, there's a new housing development going on. That was done more than 20 years ago. The profits on that are less than $1,000. Behind there, and over at Abrams Point, together, you have someplace in the neighborhood of 1,500 homes that are being built. And the profits are insignificant. So for each house that's being built, the cost to the county is running about $27,000, not including the cost of roads. And townhouses are a little bit less, but that's a good approximate number.
Mr. Dunn, could you define what a proffer is for those
Sure.
who may not know?
So a proffer is if you own some land and you decide to do something on that land that is outside of the current zoning of the land. So for simplicity's sake, you own a 100-acre farm. You decide you want to go and build, 100 houses on it. The county would say to you, you're bringing the cost to the county, and they would negotiate with you to say, fine, what can you offer to offset some of your costs? Under current law, a proffer is something that can be discussed, but the county cannot demand or say to you, as a landowner, you shall pay X. They say, well, if we want to do a vote, it would be helpful to do certain things. But that's what proffers are. Proffers are money that goes from developers to the other. And for all of you here, there is somebody here that's recording, so just be careful in what you say, because you'll end up with it on a tape. Does that answer your question on proffers?
Yes, and so that's mandated by state law?
Proffers are something that we can do. It's not mandated. So if you had that in my same example, you said, I don't want to give any proffers, and the board rezoned, that can occur. Or the board might turn you down. It's not a requirement.
Gotcha.
So, just to reiterate, it's not a requirement. If it's not a requirement, then why would our planning commission continue to approve developments that aren't gonna be offset by developers' proffers? Because obviously they know that if they're gonna bring in a certain amount of population into that particular area, then it's gonna be a cost to the county, so I would think that they would not approve those developments unless they were gonna be getting a benefit to the entire county.
So proper law has changed over the last 20, 25 years. And
Well, this is according to the Virginia code, not according to Frederick County.
Correct.
Right, okay.
And so profits have changed over the last 20, 25 years. And I can't walk through, what has or has not been done. But I know that 20 years ago, when there was rezoning, the expected growth that was occurring right now didn't occur. And so all I can tell you is that when those areas were rezoned, the board at the time, the planning commission at the time, agreed with the land developer that whatever cost he was offering to offset either schools or fire and rescue or deputies, et cetera, was an acceptable amount.
So part of the onus of not properly having enough funds for those particular schools, et cetera, goes to previous boards and planning commissions, correct?
Just repeat just say that.
So part of the, perhaps maybe they weren't, I'm just trying to figure out, because I've sat and listened to the board of supervisors get blamed for previous developments and this and that and the other, so, just to reiterate, it's not the current board of supervisors who
Correct.
are to be blamed, or the current planning commission.
Correct.
Who are to be blamed for those proffers not being given for school development and everything else.
Correct.
This previous,
Right, so,
maybe previous, 20 years ago, maybe previous ones that weren't looking far enough down the road, that didn't think that those proffers should be given.
I'll make a comment here, and then I'll recognize both of you. Right now, we're at a high school. I literally have been on this piece of land when this was nothing but woods and fields. This was a large farm. And Sensitive Village here was built. And when that village was built in 2000, 2001, 2002, this whole area, everything you see here was all woods, fields, and farms. I know you've been here.
I know you're understanding.
And so, when this was built, you would now have all these houses here. All these houses were a driver for new schools, more deputies, more staff at Station 18, which is Greenwood. And this board, the previous board, have had nothing to say on that. This is it. And furthermore, the 13,000 houses, or 13,000 lots I'm talking about, by law, there's nothing this board can do to change that. By law.
I've already been approved.
I
I understand that.
No, I'm saying, Tony, I'm saying that,
Yeah.
I'm saying that for everybody else here in this room.
Yeah.
By law,
I get that.
nothing else can be done, and so that's it. Tim?
A great example the planning commission dealt with recently is a project called Washington Commons, which fits right into what Debbie's talking about. And if you know where Walgreens is over here on Valley Mill, that's where the old 220 Seafood was behind it. You walk in, get your shrimp, you walk out with a shiny forehead. There was, that acreage, I think is a total of about 25 or 30 acres in there. But the zoning was put into place when the zoning was created in Frederick County, which was back in the 60s. It was codified in 86 when the zoning maps were established here in Frederick County to allow about 20 acres of housing in there. There are over 200 townhouses that can be built in there by right that have no proffers on them at all, meaning the developer doesn't have to do anything to offset the impacts to the county when he builds those 200 some houses. Now, if you've been out there at the ice cream place or anywhere out there, around 5 o'clock in the evening, and you take a look to the east, you'll see traffic backed up to about where Sheets is. Is this gonna put more traffic on the road? Yes. Are they gonna build a connector road back up to Valley Mill that will alleviate some of that? Yeah, that's what they've proffered to do. So they've promised to build that. They didn't have to, but they've proffered to do that. And that's about the only good that comes out of that project, to be honest. So we're very sensitive, and I think it's been about 15 years, Blaine, since the county has approved a residential project for zoning, if I remember correctly, from the planning department. So we're very sensitive to housing, and I'll tell you that. Now, if it's commercial or industrial, yeah, that adds to our tax base and helps pay for infrastructure needs that we need here in the county, and hopefully helps keep our tax rate down as well. So I can tell you the planning commission is very sensitive to that. And will continue to be as long as I'm chairman of it.
Yeah, quick, why is there not a time frame? I mean, all these proffers and this, stuff that's approved 20, 30 years ago, that makes no sense to me because over time, things change. And, you know, you would have got something on the books in 1950 that costed $5.
Right.
Why are we paying for it 50 years later?
So, good comment, I fully concur with you, okay?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, here are the facts, and then we can discuss how to change those facts. The facts are that there was no CPI component, there was no time limit. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe the proffers go with the land, and so I don't think there's an adjustment. So if there's an agreement that, you know, we give $1,000, that's $1,000, whether it's in 1980 or 2080.
Right.
So that's the item. If you want to change that, that would have to be changed at the state level. So you'd have to have a piece of legislation that passes the General Assembly, signed with the governor, that would say, for example, you know, this property is only for so long, or there will be a CPI adjustment or something of that nature. So to the best of my knowledge, that's it. I think your point's good.
Yeah.
But I'm just, so, your point is good. I'll simply say to you that, you know, that's something that on the legislative agenda is something that we might want to, you know, continue. So let me just continue to walk through, and I don't mind some questions. Let me just tell you what this, I want to walk through growth issues, I want to walk through budget issues, we'll have a discussion on that. I'm also going to give all of you, at the end of this, what are your concerns? So everybody here will have an opportunity to say, these are concerns of mine, so it's going to be a two-way conversation. On transportation, this area has grown significantly. A couple years ago, this board did set aside $7 million, $6 million last year, that would do $7 million this year for transportation. Anytime there's a transportation issue in this county, if the county would put up approximately 20% of the cost, we get money from the state for about 80%. And so if you really want to have an opportunity to improve Route 50, Route 7, bridges, etc., you have to put up cash. And that cash sometimes runs in the millions of dollars. So in this current budget that we're in right now, for example, last year we had $6 million, this year it was cut to 3.2. It was a cost savings issue. Whether that's smart or not, we can discuss, but that's one of the issues that we're dealing with. And what I'd like to do now is show you that as this population has grown, the number of students has grown, and that's becoming an issue. So on this first slide, we're going left to right. On the left, you have population from 2020. Yeah. So here you go, 2020, 59,000, 2024, 95,994. We're basically at 96,000 today. And so here's the growth. This figure here is the increase since 2000. So this population has grown 62% in the last 24 years. And remember, we are essentially in March. So we're not really through 2024. So really we're talking about 23 years and 3 months. And there's the growth that's occurred there. On all students, we've gone from 10,000 to 14,000. And that's the student population K through 12. That has grown 34%. And if you look at this, housing population's gone up 62%, that's about half. Husband and wife come together, they have a child, you have 2 people on the population side, you have 1 person on the child side, and that's occurring. The capacity of schools was 10,000 in the year 2000, it's now 14,000 now. That's all schools. Then you get to the high schools. In the high schools, you had 2,900 in the year 2000. The capacity at the time was 2,700, right here. In 2001, 2002, they built the school that we're in right now. Oh, sorry, I apologize. They built Millbrook across the street. They also built this too. So Millbrook and this were both built in that time frame.
Which time frame?
This school was built in the early 2000s. Millbrook High School was built in the early 2000s. Does that answer your question? So there was a capacity of 2,700, students were 2,900. And by 2005, high school students were 3,700, the total capacity was 4,000. So there, our capacity exceeded our students. And you've heard lots of comments that, a new high school was put on the books 20 years ago. In 2005, which is less than 20 years ago, the capacity that we had for high school students was greater than the number of students. By 2010, drove to 411, and today we have 4,600 students in high school, and the capacity is 3,900. So right now we have an overcapacity issue. When James Wood is completed, which will probably not be until September of 2025, when you have students coming in here, the capacity then will go up to 4,294. Our expected high school students will be 4,400. And then if you take a look at the next 10 years, it's expected to go from 4,400 to 5,300. That's almost 1,000 students. And capacity right now, if we stopped at James Wood and did nothing else, would be at 4,200. That is approximately 1,000 students more than capacity. It's approximately a 25% overload. So that's the issue that we're dealing with. All of you, I'll make a comment. Has anybody here lived here less than 10 years? Okay.
Sorry.
Other than those two people, for the rest of you, just think back. You all can remember 10 years ago, and you can all remember 20 years ago. And all I'm doing is saying, look what happens in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, and that's what we're looking at. So that's an issue that we're trying to go and address. On Sharando, and I have made this comment on Sharando, I do think the issue of Sharando needs to be solved. You have 16 classrooms, 7 trailers. There's approximately 300 students in those trailers each day. I was speaking to a person who said, my children went to trailers in James Wood. My grandchildren are going to trailers in James Wood. And he had the same thing occurring at Sharando. The Sharando trailers have been there since 1998. So now I'd like to talk about the FY25 budget. Right now, this budget is broken down in 2 components. The county has a component of about $128 million. The schools have a component of about, let's say, $127 million. And then we have some money from the feds, and then we have a couple $100 million that comes from the state. So I'm going to run up here, and this year's budget is about 255 total. Last year's budget was about 240, 239.6. And so, if you can put the chart scenarios. No, did you not get the chart scenarios I sent to you? Remember I was saying what it had revised? If you didn't get it. If you don't have it, it's okay.
Pop up in a second.
After you sent me yours, I sent one back to you. Yeah, that'll be fine. Can you scroll up to the top? Yeah. So, what budget scenarios? We have 4 budget scenarios, A, B, C, and D. They're all similar. There are certain adjustments that are made to this. I'm not going to walk through all the details of this. If you want to go into depth on that, we can have a much longer conversation, but it's going to take some time to do that. But basically here, you have revenue in the $250 million range, and then scroll up, Mike. Go to the ending. Then you have expenses, and on proposed budget deficits, for scenario A, it was $19,000 in the hole. Scenario B, $250,000 in the hole. Scenario C, 98,000 positive. Scenario D, 323,000 positives. So when we were walking through this, these were the numbers on the budget. Here's our revenue, here's expenses, this is what we wanna do. You board of supervisors, which one would you like to go and support or modify, et cetera. The budget that was advertised was scenario D, which is this last budget here. So that budget there shows a positive of $323,000. And this is an operating budget. But we also then took, to make this budget fly, money from capital. So now, might go up, yeah, we're good. So in our capital fund, we have $30 million. So I'll take a step back. In our capital fund, we have approximately $40 million. So that $40 million, $10 million is committed already for two projects that the board thinks is important. One was a new fire and rescue station, and one was for some items in Clearbrook. So essentially, we have $30 million of free money. And this free money is the same as if you're trying to go and save. All you need to buy a car. The car is $30,000. You've been saving up on that money. And then your spouse says, your kids say, hey, let's go to Disneyland. Let's go for a trip. You take from that money to go on a trip, or to go for Disneyland, or something like that. And then it comes time to buy a car because your car just broke down on Saturday morning, and you don't have $30,000, you only have $15,000. And you go to buy a car and you say, well, I really like that car, but it costs $30,000, I don't have it. This money here, this $30 million, is a capital fund bucket. This money is set aside for capital fund projects. By capital fund projects, we are talking about one-time large expenditures, such as a school, such as a new fire and rescue station. It's that type of item that's designed for, it is not designed for ongoing operations. So I just want to put that thought together. This year, we will take $15 million out of that capital fund to make that positive number of 323. In other words, we're going to go into savings and take $15 million to, if you will, balance the budget. Unlike the federal government, we can't print money. So the question then we have is, where do you go from here? If there was no money in capital funds, none, this county has to either make a $15 million reduction in its operating expense, or raise $15 million to balance it, or some combination thereof. But that's the issue we're talking about. And so just recognize that the seven of us are in a situation where we have some money, we have costs. Everybody here has different ideas on how to spend that money, and that's the balancing act that we are currently dealing with. We expect to have about an additional $9 million at the end of this year, being June. Our fiscal year runs from July 1 to June 30th. So we'll go back into this. So when this $15 million drawdown, we will get approximately $9 million if staff is correct on their assumptions, which then will give us $24 million next year. Mike, then go to, capital fund projections.
Revised.
Yeah, capital fund, okay. So, can you all see this? So here, you have FY25, this is our item. Going forward, the beginning balance here, this capital expenditure here, this $4 million here, $5 million here, etc. What that represents is ongoing operational categorical expenses. So for example, we have a car matrix. The car matrix says that after cars had gone so many miles, such a condition, then you get a new car. So that $5 million represents ongoing expenses by the county each and every year. It may be a capital expense, quote unquote, but it's going to be an ongoing expense. Then you have school buses, debt service, etc., school capital. For the time I've been on the board, the schools have said that they need 13 new school buses each and every year just to replace their fleet. Their fleet is 250 some school buses, and they need 13 a year. School buses are now running 130,000 each. So 3 school buses run someplace in the neighborhood of $1 million. And 13 school buses run someplace in the neighborhood of 16, 17 million, whatever 130 times 13 is. So that's the expenses that we're looking at. And we've said to the schools, you need to build into your budget an ongoing operation expense to cover that. So right now, the school board and the board of supervisors are kind of working together, and we have paid the first year cost for those. So this year, we're expected to buy 3 school buses. Next year, the school board will build that into their budget. But we will probably buy another 3 to 4 school buses in the next 1 to 2 years to meet their needs. At that point in time, the counties, at that point in time, the schools will probably have in their budget the money to cover that. But that's the type of expenses here. School capital. These figures here. The schools have said that they have about $19 million of capital needs that they need today. So if any of you has some spare change, like 19 million, we can solve that problem. Some of those things include roofs for schools, some of that includes HVAC systems, etc. You can go down through the list, it's a public document, and look at that list and see what needs to be done or not to be done. Some of those things probably need to be done now, and some of those things can be pushed off. So it's a situation where what's really critical today, what could be put off for year 1, 2, and 3. But if you put off for years 2 and 3, the items that you aren't going to do, and then years 2 and 3 come, so we aren't going to have the money for it, we have an issue. So if the old Ailer, my wife taught there, she had a nice classroom like this, and she had a bucket because the roof leaked. So literally on her desk, we went there and put a bucket, so when it rained over the weekend, her desk wasn't flooded. Because that's the type of stuff that, we're dealing with. When you take a look at these numbers here, essentially, depending on what occurs, we're not going to have a capital fund in 3 years, FY28. And if you think that roads are important and a few other things, then go to revised money. Thanks. If I just make some adjustments on this, and on the previous slide, that number there was only 3.2 million, not 7. If this county is truly serious about roads, we need to set aside money for roads to do that. Sean Graber was very good on raising that issue when he was on the board, and I applaud him for it. But we can't then go and step backwards. That's not helpful. And if you go and do a roundabout, if you do something on a bridge, etc., the state says, if you, the county, are serious, come up with some money. And the money we're talking about is $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million. It's not chump change. And so having money set aside for transportation projects as this county grows is significant.
Is that the same 20% that you mentioned earlier that the county would have to put up?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, if I raise this to $7 million here, one item, the only thing different between the previous chart and this is that item here, and I put $390,000 in there to take care of 3 school buses. And I won't say realistically, but I fully expect that next year, we will probably have 1, 2, or 3 school buses to help the schools get onto the situation where they have 13 school buses each year. You can see how, in 2 years, you have $2.9 million. In 3 years, you're in the hole. And even next year, FY26, you only have 11. And then if next year, we had the same conversation where you need $15 million, you're not gonna have it. So that's what we're dealing with on a budget situation.
These numbers that you got here, 5 million capital expenses, it's 5 million, 5.5 million.
Are you talking about these numbers?
Okay, yeah, it goes all the way through to 25, 26, 27, 28. You got the same numbers, but that's not taking into consideration any inflation or anything.
That's correct. And
So
that,
those numbers are skewed.
Or deflation.
good point. As all of you know, on budget issues, there's a difference. We're trying to be intellectually honest and trying to give out good numbers. In FY 28, is that going to be exactly 5 million? No. But it's a good estimate on where we think we'll be. And so that's what we're trying to deal with.
Based on where we are now.
Based upon where we are now, right. So whether you are, you know, a liberal or conservative,
I make a difference.
whether you're red or you're green,
I make a difference.
these numbers here are something that everyone has agreed, irrespective of what you want for an outcome, this is a best estimate on where we're going.
Question. 3 school buses, correct?
Sorry?
I see that the county's gonna pay for 3 school buses.
Yes.
Isn't that a school board expense?
So, the county gets its money, and the county then gives to the schools X number of dollars. They're giving to the schools someplace in the neighborhood $100 million, below $100 million. Schools also get another $100 million plus from the state. The schools have not, yes, it's a school expense. The county said, we will help the schools out.
Why?
Let me just finish for a second. We will help the schools go out and get the school buses they need, because they have some school buses that are so decrepit that if you had a child on them and they call and say, fine, you know, we're on a run, and it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's snowing, but our school bus just broke down, and we have literally some school buses that are pushing it. So basically, we will try to go and help them get to a point where they can do 13 school buses a year. And I was talking to this with John Lamana, you know, 5 or 6 years ago. So at least we're working, in my opinion, we're going in the right direction. When we bought the school bus in year 1, in year 2, they have then covered that cost. And so it's been a kind of a cooperative effort to do that. You can agree or disagree, but that's the thought process behind it.
Every year, the school board has X amount of dollars left over. They have to. And usually they come to you and say, can we keep this money? And 9 chances out of 10, you say, yeah, use it for X, Y, Z. Well, take that money and pay for the buses.
That money there typically has been money that was set aside for a specific project. And the project then was not completed that year, so it's a set aside for a particular project that was not completed in the year that was designated, that would be completed in the following year. So for example, if in FY '24, the year we're in right now, there was $100,000 was set aside for a project, but because of construction or whatever, the project's not gonna be done until September, October, they would say, fine, because now's June 30, we expect to have this done by September, so we're taking that money to finish the project. That's the thought process. Jody?
I got a couple different questions. So, does the state automatically give that 80% if you're saving the 20%? Is that an automatic, they're gonna give it?
No.
Or does this just depend upon whether they feel like it?
No. To the best of my knowledge, the county says to the state, there's something called a smart scale project. So the county says to the state, we have a project that we want to fund. Here's the criteria on why it's important, etc. Typically, the state will say, if you want to be competitive, and the project costs, you know, $10 million, are you going to put up $2 million? If the county says yes, okay, that makes you competitive. Then the state takes that project, and they take that project and compare with all the other requests from all the other counties in the state.
It's not a given that you're gonna
No,
get
and then the
that.
state says, I'm making up numbers here,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
know.
we have $20 million, where do we put that $20 million? And we make the case, look, we're the fastest growing, we're rural, etc.
So when you don't get those projects that you think you're gonna get, what do you do with that 20% you saved up for that project that you didn't get approved? I'm just asking.
That's fine.
That's just a rhetorical question. I'm wondering what happens with that money that
To the
doesn't.
best knowledge, from what I understand right
Does that
now,
stay in the capital fund?
stays in the capital fund for the next request. So here, in this county here, we are having discussions on a Route 37 on the eastern side. If that is built, that's gonna be a multi-$100 million project. And hopefully, it's gonna involve federal money and state money. I mean, if it were an interstate, et cetera, so that's one issue. If it is not built, and you still have this growth, then we're gonna have to deal with all the roads in Frederick County, and how to deal with that population growth. So that's the balancing act. So it's not, I wouldn't say wasted money, there's more projects that can use the money then there's money that's available.
No, and I just wanted to make for sure, because you made it sound like automatically you're gonna get that 80%. And one more, well, actually a couple. Why would the county, if you're talking about buying buses for the county, I don't know about your area, but in my area, I rarely see the buses even half full. So why would you not invest in some of the smaller buses, which obviously would take less fuel to operate and would be a little more cost effective? Why would they not consider investing in some of the smaller buses for those routes where, you know, when there's service in the area, you're not gonna have, not even a half full bus?
So the schools have bought over the last X number of years, I don't know what X is, okay? The last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, they have bought some vans, not school buses. They've bought some other smaller vehicles, I'm not gonna call it a bus, but a vehicle to do that.
Do they classify those as a school bus expenditure or not?
I don't know. The reason I don't know is a constituent came to me and said, Blaine, what are all these vehicles here? And I didn't know.
Yeah,
So
I'm curious whether they classify that as a school bus expenditure and they have extra money from what they didn't spend.
I don't think so.
It's just a question.
No, I don't think so. And my comment on that issue would be whoever your school board representative is, I'd either go to that person or go to Sturdivant, who's the chair, and ask him, because they get into that a lot deeper than I, and just to put that in perspective, they can call Dr. Hummer, who's the superintendent.
Yeah, I get you.
I can't.
So
I mean,
do
yes,
you
I
guys-
can.
Do you guys mind if I ask one more question? Because I don't have to. I mean, if somebody else has more pressing,
Go.
we'll have to.
Go ahead.
Glad to yield the floor to you.
And I still want to go through a few more things too.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
No, I'm not done. So,
He is.
pun intended, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you are done.
So answer your question, and then let me continue what I'm doing and go
Okay,
from
I'm
there.
sorry, I thought that you
No.
were completed. I haven't heard in all these discussions about the fourth high school, what's gonna actually happen to the remaining, the property, the campus property that's in use at this particular time. Is it gonna be abandoned like Frederick County Middle School was?
So
like
let me,
School was?
I heard the question.
Yeah.
Let me continue here, and at the end of this, we can continue, because that'll be fine.
Okay.
So, here's my concerns on this budget. My concerns are, how do you balance that? We'll come back to that in a second. I've offered a solution, no one else has come up with a solution, we're gonna talk about solutions here in a minute. But I've made the comment about impact fees to address this issue. And for those of you that don't know, for those of you who do know, just be quiet for a minute or two, and I'll educate those that don't, or inform those that don't. So impact fees basically say that if you go and build a house, the additional cost that you bring to the county should be borne by you, the user. All these houses here, we're all paying for. Ideally, if I could go to all those houses and the developer that built this and say, fine, your cost to the county is gonna run $27,000 for a single family house, please write a check and give it to the county. It covers this road that was built here. It covers the school building that we're in. It covers Millbrook High School. It covers Redbud Elementary School. So I've just talked about 3 schools, all within Redbud's, 500 yards away, and Millbrook's a half mile away. So you had 3 schools that were built that I literally have walked on as woods and fields because of Sovereign Village. And you have the same thing in Opeka, you have the same thing in Stevens City. So that's the issue that, we're dealing with. On impact fees in San Diego County, these people here bought a house in 1960. And that house, I'm making up numbers here, is $100,000 when they bought it. And he didn't know this, but he was assigned to the Naval Yard at Coronado. And so he walks in, buys a house, and he's good to go. Blaine Dunn, 60 years later, comes in, and they just happen to have a lot next door to them. And I build the identical house that they have. Their $100,000 house, they're paying $1,000 a year in real estate. They're getting made up numbers. But their house now is worth $1 million. And I go and build my house worth $1 million. And San Diego County says to me, Blaine, because you came here, you're bringing an additional cost that they did not. So we're gonna have your taxes at a higher level to cover your costs. And adjusted for CPI, I think that's fair. I am moving in, I am bringing an additional cost. Why shouldn't I pay? We're all familiar with user fees, and essentially that's it. In Florida, there's a similar situation where you buy a house and the amount that you pay in tax fluctuates. I'm not gonna get into the details on that. There's another gentleman here that knows that, a lot more about that than I do. But conceptually, it's fine. If you're gonna bring a cost into a county, who pays? Do the people that are existing here pay? Do you come in with your additional cost to pay? And so that's the policy question that we're dealing with. We all heard some people make the comments on spending reductions in the county. I believe that this county is fiscally well run. Our budget right now is 120, our proposed budget here is about $127, $128 million. If you take 1% of that, you're talking about $1.2 million. If you take 0.1%, you're talking about $120,000. If you take 100%, you're talking about $12,000. Can I find $12,000? Can you all find $12,000? I'm sure we can. That's not an issue. When I'm looking at a $15 million deficit, that's not significant. There's some people that made constructive suggestions on how to reduce the county budget. But those constructive suggestions in total are running less than $1 million. They're actually running less than $500,000. So I'm way short of trying to balance a budget here. Some of us in the room have different political views. I mean, you know me, I know you, etc. But this is not a political issue, this is a math issue. And so the question becomes, how do you solve a problem? I have sent 3 emails to all board members. And the emails I've sent, and I'm having a frank conversation with you, the same way I had a frank conversation with them, have been, I do think that this county is fiscally well run. The areas of growth on county staff have been in fire and rescue. As this population has grown, we've had to hire more people. I'm a strong advocate that we need to have additional fire and rescue staff. At 8 a year, that 8 a year is costing this county, will cost this county close to $900,000, close to $1 million. But the reason is as follows. In Greenwood, they are empty half the time. In Stevens City is empty half the time. And if you're in Lake Frederick and you're having a heart attack and Stevens City is empty, your next call is coming from Middletown or Stark Tannery. If you're dying of a heart attack, response times count. And 3 minutes can be the difference between life and death. So we have situations like that. Number 2, go up to Gore, go up to Reynolds Store. There, you have a fire. You have 2 people on a shift, excuse me. At Reynolds Store, you have 2 people on a shift. If there's a fire, you have 2 people responding in a fire truck. If there's someone trapped in that building, those 2 men have to make a decision. Do they go in without support to try to save a life? Or do they sit back and wait until they get 2 more people that can cover for them? Because the minute you have firemen going into a burning building, and that building collapses, you have a tragedy. And if you all remember in Loudoun County, we had a similar situation like that. We had firemen going into a burning building, and a gas explosion occurred in the house, blew up the house and killed them. So from my perspective, I don't want to be a fireman watching somebody die and say, I don't want to do something. At the same time, I and my buddy go in and die as well. That doesn't help anybody. So for that reason, I am a strong advocate. And there's a cost to that. So taking firemen from 2 to 4, where they only have 2, and from 4 to 6, I think is a necessary expense. That will cost this county about $1 million a year for the next 10 years. We're going to hire 80 firemen, EMS people, in the next 10 years. It's 80 a year for 10 years. So there's an expense to cover the growth. We also have more deputies than we had 20 years ago. Again, because of the population. And then because of the population, by law, we have to have more people in social services. So when you take a look at our county personnel, the areas of growth have been those three: social services, fire and rescue, and deputies. Everything else has been flat. Take a look at the people we have in finance staff. Take a look at the people we have in HR. You go through the whole list, and there's some 600 employees, and those are the only areas where you've had a growth area. And so, from a county perspective, if we have the same staff and we were serving more people, that's actually a good thing. Because the number of employees that are serving a greater population means that we are being more efficient. The administrator here has done a good job on doing that. And we have a new administrator, he's been here for a year and a half, 2 years. And he's been effective on finding areas to become more efficient. That's gonna take some time, but that's the issue. But as this county grows, those are expenses that, we're dealing with. So, if people have constructive suggestions on where to make cuts, let us know. The finance committee, and I'm not on the finance committee, but the finance committee, which includes supervisors Ludwig, Judy Slaughter, and Heather Lockridge, are here. You have citizen members as well that are in on that. And you can go talk to them, and if you have suggestions, lay out where you want to go and make cuts. But this is a math problem. It takes work. And I've said to finance committee people, show me where the cuts you can make are. And I don't mind supporting good cuts. But so far I haven't gotten a whole lot of responses back on that. Then you go to the revenue side. How do you raise revenue? Revenue comes from business growth, and we've had some business growth. But to get the revenues to offset the population growth, you're gonna need some revenue that comes in from businesses that generate lots of revenue. Like biotech, advanced biotech, manufacturing, data centers, etc. They bring in lots of money. Dunn's Financial Advisory Service, or Dana's, cut down your tree service, doesn't bring in the revenue to offset new houses that are being bought. Tax options. If you do taxes, what are the tax options? This year we can't do it, but next year we could if there was a desire to do so. But on taxes, Frederick County has a 4% meals tax. Winchester City has a 6% meals tax. If the board raised taxes on meals, so when you go out to eat, from 4 to 6 cents, that would bring in about $3 million. You cannot go higher than that because the law says the county can do what an adjacent county or a municipality does. So because Frederick City, or because Winchester City is adjacent to Frederick County, that gives us that option. But that's $3 million. On real estate, every penny that is raised in the real estate tax brings in approximately $1.5 million. So if we raised it by 1 cent for 51 to 52 cents, that's 1.5. If you go from 51 to 61, that's 15. But you can do the math on that. Business license taxes. You can say to businesses, we'll make it more expensive for you to operate, and that's an area. Business equipment tax, that could be an area. Those right now are capped by law, so you have to get the General Assembly to change, what we can do, but that's an item. There's also a proposal for a sales tax of 1%, which will be a referendum. In other words, all of you get to vote on it. But the only purpose for that money would be for schools construction or reducing debt. So if there were no school construction at all, and the money all went for debt, it could be used for that purpose as well. Our debt right now in this county is approximately $210 million. And we are spending approximately $22 million this year on debt service. They translate that into the 51-cent tax you pay for a real estate. That $22 million is accounting for 11 to 12 cents on that. So instead of having a 51-cent rate, if we had no debt, it'd be someplace in the high 30s, or 38, 39%, 40% range. And if that were the case, that gives you another 10 cents on real estate tax, between 41 and 51, you can deal with further growth issues. You want to go to the retirement statement, please?
So what happens when the reverse happens from all these raisings of taxes? Restaurant businesses going out of business?
Business, people
Because
moving out of the
spending
county.
money there?
Can you hold on to that for a minute, and then let me finish
And the
that?
businesses you wanna bring into the area?
Just hold on to it, I'll go ahead and address it. This is from 2023 data. I've heard multiple people say to me, Blaine, I've lived here all my life. And if you hadn't come, my taxes wouldn't go up. And one guy pounded me in the chest and he was saying it to me. He said, what do I pay for it? Your taxes done, or my medicine? So, on retirement data, the U.S. Census says that the median household income for those that are retired, 65 and up, is 52,000. At 65 plus, it's 27,000. Between 65 and 74, it's 55,000. And if you're older than 75, it's $38,000.
That's not
So-
accurate.
Well, where do you get them numbers?
That's
at?
US, not local.
Yeah,
Let
that's,
me,
that might be
let me
US.
just, let me finish, then we'll talk about items, okay?
Yeah.
This data here, and you touch with the US Census data. Median income by age, and it says without earnings means you're only living on, you're not working. This is on an individual basis from $24,000, et cetera. If you think this data is not accurate, I don't mind having good data, but this is the data that I was given. And my common question is, how do you say to somebody who's lived here all his life, that's at 38,000 or 24,000, I'm gonna go and raise your real estate taxes to pay for growth that you're not caused by? For me, and I'm not telling you anything new, I have a hard time on having real estate tax rates go up because I can't sell my extra bedroom to pay for it. So I'm looking for an alternative. That's why I strongly favor impact fees. Other people will make the comment, Blaine, you know, if you don't like that, you can move. And I've had some people say to me, Blaine, if you don't like the real estate taxes, you have to move. So that's a political fight that we can have. But I think you want to be aware of the fact that for people that are older, income is a lot less than people that are working. And people that have lived here all their life have watched this growth, which we talked about in the beginning, come in. And they've said, why are my real estate taxes going up? The house I'm in right now was built in 1990. I've lived here for 25 years or so. I've watched my taxes rise in the last 8 years while I've been on the board, approximately 50% in real estate. I mean, I was paying $1,200, I'm now paying $1,800. You can take a look at what you're doing as well. But that's because of the growth that's occurring. So, now let me have the fun part. Let's say that and smile. I'm laying out problems. What are your solutions? What are your solutions and what do you prefer? And how do you solve this problem? This is the problem that we're dealing with. So having said that, I'll be glad to open up the floor for discussion. I just simply ask that this conversation be civil. We can agree to disagree, and that's okay. And we can stay here and just lay out thoughts, etc. Go ahead.
In the line of consideration of workable solutions, you've made reference to the people that have lived here for 20, 30 years.
20, 50, 60 years.
Or longer. Looking at that table, that income data is completely out of line. When I looked at the increase, thank you for approving that, of the income guidelines for retired persons, that was a very, very modest, miserly, if I would want to be honest, increase in the income guidelines for where you would fall on property tax relief. It's really, and then I can balance the understanding with the newer people, the younger people, they have the kids, they want the high school, they want better schools, they're willing to pay for it, I get all of that. But it's gotta be balanced with a consideration for the people who've already had their taxes increased by 50% or more, who've already paid for the schools that we have, who've already paid for the improvements that we have, and then they end up at a point where they can no longer afford to stay in the home they worked all of their lives to afford to retire for, and then the uncompassionate answer is, well, if you can't afford it, then just go ahead and move. Where are we supposed to go to?
It has no taxes.
Because there is nowhere cheaper if I sell my house because I can't afford the property tax. The average price of a medium home to try to find somewhere to downsize to a less expensive home is non-existent. that means we have to leave the county, and then by extension, let's be honest about it, there's no surrounding counties that we could go to that would be more affordable. So now we're forcing the people that paid for everything that you see to have to relocate to us, to West Virginia somewhere. And we came here because we liked it here. I don't wanna be priced out of the market in the next 10 years and say I can no longer afford to live in Frederick County, so I can pay for a Ford high school. And I'm not saying we don't need a Ford high school, that's not the topic of conversation. This is a math problem, I agree with you. But in the math problem, there needs to be some kind of a structure on the ability to pay, not say it's gotta be equal and fair across the board, because our numbers aren't equal and fair across the board.
Let me